All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Rhea Rothels, calling in from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am here on behalf of Hone. Hone offers live virtual instructor-led training at scale. So we have an unlimited subscription to live instructor-led training to teach your employees the power skills they need to be successful. Been with Hone for about 2 years now. I lead our learning solutions department. That's our L&D consulting arm. And prior to joining Hone, I was the head of learning and development at Dow Jones, which is the parent company of the Wall Street Journal. So I've been on the vendor side and I've been on the in-house side, and I'm really excited to talk today about L&D technology. And then just for a fun question, because we're here to talk about tech, if we could share our favorite app, Alex and Minji, get ready. My favorite app right now is an app called Tiny Beans because I have a little 6-month-old baby and I get to share photos every day with my friends and family through that app. So that's what I spend a lot of time on. And with that, I will pass it to Alex to do his intro.
Thank you. So I'm Alex Kinney. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you to Hone for hosting. I'm the VP of Learning Solutions at Learnerbly. I come from an organizational psychology background. So my master's is in industrial organizational psychology. That's my training and background. And prior to this, I'm relatively new here. I'm in my first 6 months, but I worked for a company called 360 Learning for 6 years. I've been talking ed tech for about a decade, whether it's being a user. Again, I've been on both sides of this table. I've been a user and a vendor. So yeah, I've been in the ed tech space for a decade. I think my favorite app right now, I feel like I missed something, but my favorite app is currently Headspace. It's one that I actually used my Learnerbly stipend to purchase. Well, that's what I forgot what Learnerbly does. We're an L&D marketplace. So it's like a multimodal LXP, the thing I'm here for. It's like a multimodal LXP. So instead of just shooting e-learning videos at people, we've got books, podcasts, live coaching, language training, wellness apps like Headspace and New York Times, Harvard Business Review. Really, you can get the licenses in front of the people that actually want them and need them. It saves money and it increases learner engagement because we'll talk about andragogy on this call, I'm sure, but basic human principle that you need to understand what skills you're developing and how it helps you to be engaged with learning. So a little bit about what we do. My favorite app is Headspace. I actually used my Learnerbly stipend on it. It cost me nothing personally, but it's been great. You know, throughout the day, learning a lot about mindfulness and meditation. It's a lot harder than I thought it was, but it's a very humbling experience, and I would recommend Headspace to anyone. So that being said, I'd kick over to Minji.
Alex, it is really hard to remember all the points you need to hit in an intro, and Rhea killed it, so I feel you.
Sure.
um, Hi, my name's Minji Liu, and I'm based out of Los Angeles. I'm the Director of People Development at Greenhouse Software. Greenhouse is a applicant tracking and recruiting tool. So if you're looking for a new tool on your recruitment processes, reach out to me. My background is varied. I have worked at a few startups now or tech companies in learning and development and performance management type roles. Also, I've engaged with engagement surveys. Prior to that, I worked in consulting and marketing. That was a career pivot for me, actually. So that's a little bit of my background, and I'm always very eager to talk to people about career pivots. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, please do. My favorite app, I don't have a recent new one, but Spotify is my best friend, solid for years. We've, had many fun times with music together. And of course, my favorite podcast is hosted there, Armchair Expert. If there's any armchairies, pop into the chat. And thank you so much, Hone and Learnerbly, for having me today.
Thank you for the intros. If you have a favorite app and you want to share it in the chat, please go ahead. We can, maybe get inspired of some new apps out there. But let's go ahead and get into the content, some good cues in the Q&A box already. So please feel free to continue to chat in. I did want to share, you are going to get an exclusive takeaway today after today's webinar, which is our tech evaluation checklist. We put this together, the three of us, literally just for you for this webinar. It's all of the things that we've had to think through when choosing technology for L&D, and it's all the things that we think are really important. So we put together this little checklist. You will get it as a takeaway via email in a nice PDF, and hopefully it'll help you as you make these decisions in your role. So with that, Let's get started. Minji, you are our special guest today because you are a customer of both Learnerbly and Hone, which we're thrilled about. I would love if you could kick us off with telling us a bit about how you thought about your tech stack as you were building it at Greenhouse.
Yeah, great question. Just to set some context, I joined Greenhouse last March, so I'm coming up on a year. And my job was to stand up the function and provide employees with the tools needed to support their growth. And from our listening tour and just ideating on some different strategies, we decided on 3 key pillars to encompass what we wanted to offer, those being cohort programs, scaled resources, and team effectiveness. The reality was, for a very long time, it was a team of 2, including myself. So a very small team and a brand new function. And we had to outsource to basically deliver on what was needed. And so luckily for us, when we found Hone, it filled the gap of both cohort programs and scaled resources. As most people on the call know, and like we've mentioned, Hone provides live small group learning sessions on important leadership skills through their platform. As an L&D person at heart, I love cohort programs and I love live learning sessions. Instructional design, I facilitate, I get in the weeds that way, and it's just so much fun. There's nothing like getting into a room with other humans and going through the messiness of learning together. And I've had the privilege of building those types of programs in-house and those live workshops. We've seen like amazing impact where like an employee will have an increase in confidence on a given skill anywhere from 5 to 33%, like post program. And so like we know this works. But that being said, that kind of learning experience isn't for everyone. And the reality is we have a limited time period every day to get things done in the working world. And so Learnerbly came into our strategy when we needed a scaled resource for individuals to go in and choose what they wanted to work on from a development perspective. We did have a stipend, and that was pre-COVID for development. But during COVID, that turned into a wellness stipend and morphed into people's paychecks. And so 4 years later, can't believe it, 4 years later, it's hard to make employees go back to using those funds for development. And so Learnerbly provides that controlled environment for employees to focus those funds on anything development. So with those together, it's sort of meeting all the needs of our employees and also what we want to do strategically as a function.
Awesome. I would say as a follow-up to that, how did you make sure that that's tech stack that you went for, like before you actually engaged in purchasing products, how did you make sure that it aligned with sort of the competencies that you were trying to have at Greenhouse, the overall strategic goals in terms of growth and development? How did you ensure that they aligned and that's what you bought?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 2 strategic goals as a company this year. One of those being creating a culture of performance. And as L&D folks, we all know that employee cannot achieve peak performance without learning. And the thing about performance is that it looks different at every level. I see managers, senior leaders, and learning therefore looks different. So the fact that Hone, as an example, has classes for individual contributors, managers, and managers of managers, that was really critical to our decision. Another, strategic goal for us this year is around efficiency, and I think probably every company is dealing with that right now. And so Learnerbly is an incredible tool for that because it partners with other learning providers, and an employee can get what they want and just that. They can get a book, a coaching session, a specific technical course, like a coding program, a coding class through an academy. And that's all you have to pay for, as opposed to, getting a seat for a very expensive platform like that.
I think this relates to one of the questions in our Q&A, another plug, put your questions in, from Jade. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing, or Jade. But it's a good question. Best practices for setting up learning and development for managers to help coach them in managing their team and having effective one-on-ones. One of the things that I heard Minji say, and would love your thoughts on this, is variety. At Greenhouse, it sounds like they are offering the live cohort, instructor led. And they are also offering the ongoing resources, the books, the supplemental things that managers need. And so I was thinking, as you were talking, Minji, variety is really an important piece of setting up successful L&D programming, I would say. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's variety in two different dimensions, which is like variety of skill set. Hone and Learnerbly. I mean, Hone is an example, like 100+ classes on different topics, but also it's a variety in the method. So we've got introverts like Greenhouse, like every other company. They don't want to be in a workshop with somebody talking to them for an hour at times, right? Like sometimes that's not for them. Sometimes they'd rather reflect, read a book, listen to a podcast, and bring that back to other folks later. So I think it's, as learning styles are important to factor into the decisions that you make on tech stack and the offerings.
Yeah, I would echo that too. The way I always frame it is that there's a time and place for everything. Your toolkit has more than one tool. It's a toolbox full of tools. You don't use a hammer to screw in a screw. You need to have a diverse approach when it comes to L&D for all the reasons Minji mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for your question. One of the things that I feel like this moment in time, one of the things we're facing as L&D leaders is this need to have a lot of cooks in the kitchen when designing L&D programs and involving a lot of different stakeholders in the decision-making process. I don't know if you all are experiencing this as well, those of you dialed in, but would love to hear, Alex, your thoughts and what you've been seeing in the industry around stakeholder involvement when choosing a tech stack.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a good thing to think of early and often when you're looking at procuring software. I mean, it's changed so much over the last 7 or 8 years. I say we have too many cooks in the kitchen fans in the chat, but it's true. The number of stakeholders has just ballooned. It used to be that an L&D manager could find a software that works for them at the manager level, they would procure it, and then people would benefit from it. Now, there are too many cooks in the kitchen, and you've got sponsors, indirect users, stakeholders. You have to account for all of these things. I'll go into what each one does, but yeah, you're going to have to involve the C-suite and finance in your decision-making process way more than you did 5 years ago. And I can attest to that both as a purchaser of software and a vendor of software. So again, early and often, know who will be involved in advance. The last thing you want is surprises. I have literally seen this, and it's sad, but an L&D, or let's say a director of L&D will find a tool. They do all these demos, they get the pricing, they find the one that works for them, and they get to finance, and finance says, yeah, we're not spending money on this. So you've just spent, it's defeating and it's demoralizing. So avoid that by getting them involved really early, and set a roadmap for realistic expectations. What you can do tangibly as an org is say, hey, by the end of this month, I want to have a short list of vendors. By the end of this quarter, I want to have all of my stakeholders involved and them on a second round of demos, and they understand the pricing and there's no surprises in the process. So set goals and timelines for yourself. And then my very loquacious answer here, I'll wrap up here. There's really 3 buckets of people that you need to be aware of when you're purchasing software. The sponsors, these are the people with the checkbook. They're arguably the most important at this point. You've got the end users. Who's actually going to be using this software and what are they getting out of it? These tools that we're buying, what are the desired outcomes for purchasing them for our end users? Is it learner engagement? Is it, Minji had a great call out earlier, 5 to 33%. That's quantitative. She's measuring impact of the products that she's bought. That's really critical. And then the last one would be indirect users. So if you're using, shout out to Greenhouse, it's an awesome tracking system. The end user would be the applicant. These could be external people. You might have consultants who are using your product. There are indirect users of this product who are going to want to be involved in the process. So long story, but it's expanded a lot early and often. That's the key. Get everyone involved.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Minji, to that?
Yeah, I'll just add, I'm going to assume that most of the folks on here are L&D or HR folks who are working on L&D projects, and just say, like, speaking of skills, when we are in this sort of role, the most important skill usually is around stakeholder management and change management. And you can be like an L&D nerd. I love it. That's what I studied too. But that is what makes you most effective in this kind of situation.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea to actually like write out a stakeholder map.
Yeah.
All of the users Alex just mentioned on an Excel, what do they care about? And how am I going to address that and make it so that they understand how this is going to benefit them and the organization? And literally writing it out is sometimes really helpful to see. And you might be surprised with the number of people on that list.
That's a good call out too that I sort of left out of my answer, but understanding that not everyone in the organization knows what L&D does. So talking to them from their lens and framing it in their lens. Hey, finance, Learnably will save us money because we have 15 invoices. It puts it in one invoice. Hone will upskill us by 33%. It leads to these outcomes, lack of attrition. Finance as well. That's amazing. I can understand numbers. If you're talking to numbers people, talk numbers. If you're talking to people, talk people. It's a really good point. Yeah. So closing that circle, I guess change is a constant in organizations. There's no question about that. So you've purchased this tech stack, Minji, and you've done all the evaluations. How do you ensure that it's scalable? And how do you ensure that as the organization grows and needs change and evolve, what considerations and steps did you take to ensure the scalability of this current stack?
Yeah, absolutely. Scalability is one of those things that is tricky. It sort of poses the challenge of quality and cost. Obviously, L&D teams, we have to be conservative lately, but at the same time, there's really no point in investing in something that isn't going to work, that is not providing like a positive or useful experience for your employees. So Hone is an example. There's a lot of competitors in this space, but most only offer exclusive customized classes to their clients, which can get very expensive really fast. But with membership, we don't have to compromise on the quality of the curriculum or facilitators because the business model makes it affordable. For those who don't know, Hone membership allows an employee to take as many live classes as they want with other membership holders. So our employees get the benefit of live learning sessions without the huge cost for us. Plus, our employees actually like the idea of being in a workshop with somebody else, other people from other companies who have Hone membership. And so it's really that cost analysis that made us make sure that this was going to be scalable long term as we grow and make sure that we're still adding value to our employees.
And I think this relates, I'm looking at the Q&A to Brett's question. Brett said, we're facing budget crunches. Yes, everyone in L&D is for sure. And the big stay at the same time, how do you balance development programs for forward movement and internal mobility for people that maybe want a lateral change in a company? Just a couple of thoughts, and Minji, Alex would love your thoughts too. I think part of it is prioritizing. Sometimes as L&D practitioners on my practitioner side, we get really excited about a lot of the offerings that is out there. And we want to do it all, right? There's such cool stuff, live stuff, AI stuff, on-demand stuff, etc. And L&D is not just a one-time, only thinking about this year, right? Oftentimes learning takes, as you all know, I'm preaching, but it takes years to develop skills. And so when you think about the budget, you can think about what's going to be a longer term solution for my organization. And maybe I can even spread budget out or commit to a price point, right? Like we're talking about technology, right? So vendors are willing to negotiate when you commit to that. And you can prioritize, okay, this year I want to focus on XYZ skill set and what's going to really fit that. So anyway, just thinking about when you're facing a budget crunch, it's important to make sure you're choosing the right technology or leveraging the technology you have, thinking about long-term, because surprisingly, that can be helpful for budget and prioritizing. Anyway, Minji, Alex, do you have thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I definitely have thoughts. We have made some conscious decisions that not everybody is getting the same development opportunities. If you are an experienced manager who is high performing and you are nominated as like a future successor to our senior leadership team, you get our in-house program. Other new managers, they're getting Hone courses. All individual contributors, they're going to get Learnerbly. We have a sort of like a first come, first serve basis situation there, which I can share more about later. But not we've had to be smart about the budget. And so not everyone is getting the same experience, and that's okay. We are investing and prioritizing the talent that we feel like will really benefit from what we're offering.
Yeah, I'd say there's two quick trends there. One, I gave a talk at TICE last year around proving impact as L&D and organizational development professionals. I say this with love because I consider myself in the OD bucket, but no one does a worse job of discussing their wins with the organization than L&D and organizational development. No one is less boisterous about the great things we do than us, and we need to be more vocal about that and reiterate to the organization, I rolled out this plan, we had these awesome outcomes, this is why my job matters, and this investment matters. That's how you prevent your budgets from being cut next year, is if you're, again, to Minji's amazing point, quantify your impact. So the second one is DEIB. It's not something you can just train on. It's something you do. So to bring it back to what Learnerbly does, if you offer everyone this learning stipend, they've got the same AI-powered marketplace, the same learning opportunities. You can build skills, and it's an even playing field. Everyone has the access to this platform with this money. Instead of the squeaky wheel getting the grease, what ends up happening is engineering teams get all the budget and no one else gets learning budget. So it's really important to remember DEIB is part of the fabric of your company. You can't just run once a year and say, oh, we're an equitable, inclusive company. That's not how it works. It's a longitudinal thing.
100%. We have, we have a question in the Q&A that I want to relate to a question that we already planned to talk about, which is change management. Whenever we think about a new technology and implementing new technology, I'm sure all of us like roll our eyes and we're like, oh my gosh, another technology. I read somewhere by Josh Bersin that the average HR organization has 50 plus technology stacks. So we get it. We, Hone and Learnerbly, we appreciate what we do, and we understand that you have a lot going on, which is why integrations and things like that, I saw a question on integrations, are really important. But anyway, I digress. So change management is really important to get people to adopt whatever technology you're choosing. And this relates, Matthew, to your question, how do you address low adoption for resources in L&D tech stack when it's seen as critical for some parts of the business? So I think that kind of goes together. So would love, Minji, to hear your thoughts and what you've really done at Greenhouse. And then Alex, of course, and I have some thoughts we can chime in.
Yeah, for sure. This is where I put my old marketing hat on, and we have to entice and make those employees interested in what we're offering. So I'll just say that we are kicking off with Hone membership first at Greenhouse, and we will do Learnerbly as a launch next quarter. But for membership, we actually are launching this through a commercial spot tomorrow during our company-wide kickoff. And the commercial spot features a few Greenies children, ages like 21 months or 7 months, 21 months all the way to like 11, to share what they love learning and encouraging grown Greenies, to continue their learning. And this will make a splash. We're really excited about it. We're also creating some demand. So as I mentioned earlier, we're doing a first come, first serve basis. And what we've done, as with anything on my team, is launch things as a pilot first. So we're launching with 200 seats, and that scarcity will create demand. And hopefully what we can do is then get more seats when those 200 are full. So those sorts of things are happening. We'll pulse throughout the year to, get more seats filled, marketing, all that stuff. So that's just an example. On the Learnerbly side, we're still figuring out what we want to do for launch. We could do a first come, first serve org-wide launch where people apply to get those funds because it's money. Or we could go by department based on which departments are most interested in this. So we're still figuring that out. We'll have to have a follow-up webinar to talk about how that works out.
For sure. We'll regroup. We'll have V2 of this. Yeah, change management is really hard. Again, as an organizational psychologist, I promise you, there are folks who their entire life is dedicated, their entire career is dedicated to helping orgs navigate change. It is literally their whole job. They're change management consultants. I think the word I always use to keep ripping off my own TICE talk, I'm plagiarizing myself, framing. Everything you do in the org needs to be framed correctly. Hey, we're doing this thing because it helps X, Y, and Z. Hey, we're going to have this percentage of increase of engagement in this function. Our attrition will go down because, when we roll out Learnerbly and the engineers stay, and these are really expensive roles to replace. So framing is super important. Talk about your wins. Don't be shy. Framing is the key.
Absolutely. The one other ad would be, remember that stakeholder map you created when you were considering your L&D technology? You can use that again to get those champions you've created through the buying process to really help continue talking about the technology and why it's great. So one of the things at Hone we work with our customers to do is, like Minji mentioned, that marketing plan, right? How are you going to make it feel exciting? An easy way is to get those executives that you involved to talk about it, like in her, in Greenhouse's kickoff, right? Or even just to their teams. I think the other thing I'll mention is, L&D is challenging. And Matthew, this goes back to your question, how do you get people to adopt the L&D resources? Listen, it's challenging because people want to do their jobs first. They're like, I'm busy. I got work to do. I don't have all this time to sit around and take a class, etc. But we know it's important, right? And it's important for the organization. So getting the leaders of your learners to also understand the why and the framing, like Alex mentioned, is really helpful because they can support their direct reports in taking the training. They can talk about it in their one-on-ones. They can, say, hey, I saw this class in Hone membership. I'm going to take it. You want to come with me? Right? And you can slowly embed it in your organization, create a culture of learning. And that'll really help with the change management as well. But it has to be fun. It has to be valuable and relevant. And they have to know the why and the framing as well. Any final thoughts on that?
No, it's Andrew Gaji. It's Adult Learning Theory 101. You very succinctly put it.
Yep. So we have a question from Camilla. How do you see a benefit of AI from an L&D perspective? And I think not just AI, but I would say, the latest technology trends in general too. I mean, AI is obviously a huge one, but would love your thoughts, Alex, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I'd caution. I have a bit of a spicy take on the Gen AI in L&D, but I'd preface it with there's always a shiny new toy. You remember it was gamification, and then it was learning in the flow of work, and now we've got AI and machine learning, and every single vendor is just screaming AI and hoping that people buy it. You have to understand why you're buying the software. AI can help us, and here's my spicy take is that I think generative AI for like an LMS where it's just building courses is actually bad. I think that's a really deleterious thing. There's enough content in the world. We don't need more mid-range content created by AI where it takes a PDF and it makes it a course. I don't understand who that's helping. Where I think AI can really help, and again, hashtag ad Learnerbly, is the organizing of getting the right content in front of the right people. There's hundreds of thousands of off-the-shelf courses that exist in terms of mapping those to the skills ontologies that are important for your people. That is where AI can help. It can, in real time, sort through those 100,000 courses, say, hey, this person's trying to get better at having tough conversations. These are 3 things that people in similar roles in similar companies really benefited from. That's what they should take to get better, and then it closes the loop. That's where AI is helpful. I do not think Gen AI creating a bunch of mid-level courses is going to help anyone.
I love a hot take. Thank you for saying that. That's great. And I fully agree. If I can step back for a second, I was having a really interesting conversation with a family friend of mine. He's an executive producer at HBO. He's worked on True Detective, like all these shows that we love. And obviously was very affected by the strikes and the whole AI situation happening in Hollywood. And what I thought was interesting was he shared how a guidance counselor at his daughter's school came in to talk about how in this new age that we're in, we have to lean into what makes us human. And I think that the skills that we can develop in Hone and Learnerbly is making us better at being humans. And I think that's always going to remain critical to who we are and how we work. Even though the things that we may do change with AI, it will just always remain the same. And so I'll leave that as consider how it's a tool. AI is a tool, but it's at the end of the day, it's about like what you create as a human.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, Hone offers live training, meaning there is a coach facilitator there working with you. You are with peers, you are discussing, you are exploring. And I really feel like the people skills need to be learned with people, right? And you need to be able to practice it. I think AI has a place, absolutely. I've seen some really cool technologies where you can talk to, an AI bot that seems like a human, and that can get you to a certain level of proficiency. But there is something about connecting with others, especially in this virtual hybrid space, that I think is really important to solidify the skills. I mean, it's why I work at home, right? I think there's just something special about that. But I also think AI can take on a lot of interesting things that are challenges. Like when we think about data, when we think about the logistics around L&D, when we think about, the need for continuous learning, right? And recommendations, like a Netflix, right? There's stuff there, right? And there's always more to learn and try. But at the end of the day, Alex, Minji, I completely agree. If we're talking about human skills and people skills and leadership skills, you kind of need that live touch, in my opinion. So interesting. There's also a lot of other trends out there related to L&D that's interesting. And it's kind of like where the wind blows, Alex, to your point, like whatever the latest article is.
Shiny new toy, always a shiny new toy.
There is. We have a question from Matt that I think is interesting because I think it is so relatable. So thank you, Matt. He says, when looking at L&D budgets, we base that on strategic aims for a given year. Sure. But commonly senior leadership pivots their focus. I'm sure many of us have experienced this, which results in the success of a technology or other solution suffering due to a drop in engagement. And then there's budget cuts, and you kind of have this spiral, all because there was a pivot in the strategy that impacted L&D. Raise your hand if you can relate. We hear this all the time with our customers. So Minji, Alex, do you have any thoughts on that to get us started? Otherwise, I can chime in.
Ooh, I have so many thoughts. I mean, L&D teams have to be as agile as any other team is expected to. And I think that's where it's important to have things in your back pocket and sort of scenario plan. Like if this were to happen, this is how I would pivot, and I would switch up like this offering. I would do this at a different cadence and whatnot. I feel that pain. And of course, L&D needs to always support the business strategy, but there are certainly ways to just make sure that there's scenario planning. I know at Greenhouse, what I find interesting is our recruiting team pivots the way they work based on how much they're hiring. So in a high hiring season, this is how their processes and sort of a workforce planning goes. And a low season, they have that scenario. I think L&D teams should have this very similar scenarios planned out.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I think you've covered it really well. I'd say change is the only constant. Having generalizable goals is another good thing of, your folks are going to need to be trained. They're going to need to be upskilling and reskilling constantly. Change is the only constant. You can kind of work that into your strategy when you're pitching things to executives of, look, I'm the change management department. I'm needed for these very reasons. No one could help you navigate change better than an L&D or organizational people team. You're the experts in this.
Yep, totally agree. And what I appreciate about Learnerbly and Hone is they offer a variety of upskilling opportunities for a variety of topics, right? It's not just one thing. Hone has 75 classes, right, that span the spectrum. Learnerbly is a resource house that has, tons of resources available, right, Alex? So depending on what the pivot is, you might need to change the topic, but you don't necessarily need to change the technology, right? If you're investing in the right technology to begin with. But yeah, we gotta move with the pace of the business always as L&D people. I'm doing a 5-minute warning. So if you have any last minute Q&A, put them in there. I do want to answer Catherine's question. Integrations. Do our systems integrate with LMS? Maybe Minji, you can also share how, if you guys have any integrations. I will say yes, absolutely. Hone integrates with LMS. I think it is important for learners to have a streamlined, let me dare say, beautiful experience when participating in L&D, right? Because that's the world we live in. If it's not a good user experience, you are not going to have users, right? So it needs to be streamlined. It needs to be easy. Alex, what do you think? You're going to agree with me.
I would agree. Yeah, integration. I guess it helps you make that pitch that we talked about earlier. Because one of the questions you're inevitably going to get is, does this integrate with the systems we already have? And you can just say, yep, it's got X, Y, and Z. Again, for Learnerbly, we integrate with your HRIS, with Slack. We didn't talk too much about learning culture because it wasn't really the focus of today's talk, but having integrations with tools like Slack is absolutely critical, because then the learning culture has to be something that happens organically. Like we see our Learnerbly clients, a lot of them have actual like impromptu book clubs that pop up at their organization, and they chat about the books they bought in Learnerbly. And I think that that's really cool personally. And that's why I joined this company, because it's a little different. And again, spending so many years at an LMS where it's absolutely pulling teeth to get them into the thing, it's cool to see a product that, more than half your people are going to be going in every month to it. That's unheard of in L&D. So yeah, integrations with things like Slack are a huge part of why we see that traction.
Yeah, and then just your second part of your question, Catherine, you want to be able to kind of track a learner's experience with their worker data so you can splice and dice. Absolutely. I think that's really important when you're looking at the ROI. Alex mentioned we don't do a great job at measuring the success of our L&D program. So as easy as we can make it for you as the learning leader who has to tell the story of the experience, absolutely. It's super important.
Yeah, and Samantha, I can rapid fire does every LMS have issues with SCORM tracking? Yes, because SCORM is from the 90s and it's terrible. So I can quickly get that one out of the way. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer.
That's funny. Okay, I like this as a concluding thought. It was anonymously submitted, but it's what are some good resources to keep updated on L&D trends? And I would love to open this up to the chat as well. You're all HR and L&D folks on the call. If you want to post any L&D resources that you like to stay on top of, feel free. We can all learn from each other here. Alex, Minji, anyone or anything you follow in particular?
You kind of just you showed my answer. I was gonna say talk to each other. It's the best way to figure out what's going on. Talk to other folks in your position. That's join groups, ATD, IO site groups that I join. Just talking to people in the industry is the best thing that you're gonna get, because they are also, the Josh Bursons of the world. That's an obvious bellwether, but talk to each other. It's the best way you can figure out what everyone's dealing with.
There's so many, I call them like psychological influencers out there. Like we got the Brene Browns and the Simon Sinek's and we got Burson, all these. And I think ultimately we are all creative human beings and we can figure out problems and we can take inspiration, we can take best practices, but everything that is meaningful, I believe, has come from like pure creativity and full ownership. And so that's my leaving note to you all is just to embrace what you can create on your own.
I love that. And learn with other people.
Yep.
Thank you all so much. I would like to give a big thank you to Alex and Minji for joining me today on today's webinar, and for all of you for taking time out of your day to join us. As I mentioned in the beginning, you'll receive a recording. Feel free to share it. You'll also receive our checklist that we created just for you. So feel free to share that as well with your teams. We hope that it's helpful. We do have a very short feedback survey at the end of this. We want to do this more. We want this to be helpful for you. And if you'd like to learn more about Learnerbly or Hone, we obviously would love to talk to you more about it. You could just put that in the survey and we'll reach out to you. And with that, thank you so much for coming today.
This was fun.
Thank you so much. I had a blast.
Yeah, it was. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.